A civilization rarely falls. It simply stops being reinforced. The buildings remain. The roads remain. The titles, the registers, the rituals of administration continue for generations after the coordination that once held them together has quietly stopped functioning. At Angkor, the vast temple city that anchored the Khmer Empire for nearly 6 centuries, this pattern unfolded across one of the largest engineered water systems the pre-modern world ever built. A network so extensive that its own maintenance eventually exceeded what any surviving administration could sustain. What follows is not the story of an empire destroyed. It is the story of a system that kept moving long after it had stopped holding together. By the 12th century, Angkor's water management network extended across roughly 1,000 square kilometers of the Cambodian plain, an interlocking system of reservoirs, canals, and moats designed to capture monsoon runoff and distribute it through the dry season. Barrays, immense rectangular reservoirs, each holding millions of cubic meters of water, fed a lattice of channels supplying rice fields, temple complexes, and a population historians estimate may have exceeded 500,000 people at its peak. The system required constant coordination. Sluice gates opened and closed in sequence, silt cleared before it could choke a channel, embankments repaired before a single breach could cascade through the network below it. Under Suryavarman II and Jayavarman VII, the empire had built administrative structures capable of managing exactly this. Temple foundations doubling as record-keeping institutions, inscriptions tracking labor obligations, a hierarchy of officials responsible for specific stretches of canal and specific sections of embankment. The system, at its point of greatest extension, was designed to buffer an entire agricultural cycle against the unpredictability of a monsoon climate, storing surplus in the wet season precisely so that scarcity in the dry season would never become visible to the population depending on it. The system's greatest strength was also the source of its eventual strain. Each new temple complex, each new reservoir, each new canal extension added to the network's total maintenance burden without a corresponding expansion in the administrative capacity required to sustain it. Construction, backed by royal patronage and religious prestige, remained easy to justify and easy to fund. Maintenance, by contrast, produced no monument, earned no inscription, and attracted no comparable royal attention. Officials responsible for canal upkeep continued filing the same reports their predecessors had filed a century earlier, describing routine desilting and embankment repair, even as the actual scale of the network had grown well beyond what routine maintenance could keep pace with. The reports did not stop. What they described gradually stopped matching what was happening on the ground. New administrative layers were occasionally added to address specific bottlenecks, additional overseers, additional inspection cycles, but each addition managed a symptom rather than the underlying imbalance between what the network had grown to include and what its coordination structure had originally been sized to handle. Downstream, this gap surfaced first as inconvenience rather than crisis. Rice farmers at the network's edges adjusted their planting schedules around water deliveries that arrived less predictably each season, without any single official ever recording a formal failure. Temple communities responsible for redistributing water within their districts began prioritizing the channels nearest their own complexes, a local adaptation that made sense at each individual site, and quietly abandoned the network's original logic of integrated, empire-wide distribution. No directive authorized this shift. No record acknowledged it as a departure from the system's design. It simply became how water moved, one district at a time, until fewer people remained whose task was to notice that the network no longer moved as a single coordinated whole. Labor once assigned to clearing distant channels was quietly redirected toward nearer, more visible problems. A redistribution that made perfect sense to each community, and none whatsoever to the system as originally conceived. Archaeological evidence from the 13th and 14th centuries shows a network under increasing physical strain. Silted channels never fully cleared, embankments patched rather than rebuilt, reservoir capacity gradually diminished by sediment that outpaced the labor available to remove it. Analysis of the region's sediment layers and canal cross-sections suggests some of the largest channels had narrowed significantly by this period, carrying a fraction of the flow they had been engineered to handle. None of this appears to have registered as a singular emergency. Each blocked channel was a local problem, addressed or not addressed by whichever community depended on it most directly. The empire's administrative center, still occupied with temple construction, religious foundation, and the ordinary business of a functioning court, had no mechanism designed to aggregate thousands of small, local degradations into a single legible signal of systemic decline. A silted channel 2 districts away from the capital simply never generated a report capable of reaching anyone positioned to compare it against the 100 other channels experiencing the same slow narrowing. Climate researchers have identified alternating periods of severe drought and intense monsoon flooding across the 14th and 15th centuries. Conditions the network, at full function, might once have absorbed through its redundancy and scale. But a system already operating with narrowed channels, unrepaired embankments, and fragmented local management possessed far less capacity to buffer extremes than its original design had provided. Floods breached weakened embankments that decades of deferred maintenance had left vulnerable. Droughts exposed the consequences of reservoirs no longer holding their intended capacity. Officials continued recording the water they could account for, describing conditions in the language their predecessors had used, even as the network those descriptions referred to had become something structurally different from what the records still assumed it to be. The vocabulary of administration persisted. The system that vocabulary had once accurately described did not. By the time Angkor's population began dispersing toward the 15th century, no single failure explained the departure. The rice fields still existed. The temples still stood. Inscriptions from the period show a court still issuing land grants and religious endowments, as though the underlying agricultural surplus that had once justified them remained as reliable as it had been 3 centuries earlier. But the coordination that had once distributed water across an entire integrated system had already been gone for generations, replaced by a patchwork of local adjustments that could no longer sustain the scale the city had been built for. At what point does a system's own continuation become indistinguishable from its disappearance? When the reports keep arriving, the offices keep functioning, the water keeps moving somewhere, but no version of the whole that any single person could still recognize remains intact. What ends is rarely the population. It is the coordination between them. The canals at Angkor did not fail in a single season, and no record marks the moment the network stopped being a network. Fragments of the system persisted long after its coherence had gone. Routes still walked, sluices still occasionally opened, titles still assigned to positions whose original function no one remaining fully understood. Recognition arrived only once the disappearance was already complete, and by then, nothing remained whose task it was to notice. If this exploration stayed with you, you'll find more on timeless questions,